Welcome back to Just Another Solar Podcast with Luke Beattie. That's me, Karl Jensen. G'day, Karl.
That's me. How you going, Luke?
Good, mate. And industry legend, Nigel Morris. How you doing, mate?
I'm good. Thanks, fellas. Up here in sunny Townsville.
So you're up there for the SEA conference?
That's right. I've been doing the roadshow. We're in Brisbane on Wednesday and Townsville today.
Okay. And what's been the content? What's been delivered to the participants there?
Look, the team from SEA have done a great job. It's very, very educational, very low on the marketing hype. You know, as a manufacturer or even a sponsor, you've really got to keep the hype to a minimum and really deliver some meaningful content. Everyone I spoke to got a lot out of it. There were 60 CPD points for anyone who attended. So the attendance, we were sold out on both shows. So, yeah, really good. Really, really good.
And did any of the pointy topics come up? I'm guessing the GSD devices would have come up and the question time would have been interesting.
Yeah, it was. Actually, Ergon were there at both events, which was great. Sort of representing the whole emergency backstop issue. They actually gave me a lot of insight. It's not a mea culpa, but we sort of shredded them last time a little bit about what they were doing and how stupid it was. And to be honest, they kind of admitted that the GSD device is a very dumb knife switch. In simple terms, their perspective was, look, this stupid $70/$90 device is a crude device. We don't expect it to be used very often. It's only there for emergency situations, and it'll be triggered by AEMO, not the state government. It was what AEMO wanted. But they also laid out their roadmap for all the cool shit that they've got going on, and they have dynamic export control. They have a whole lot of other things already under development.
Right, so this is just an interim measure that they're putting in there.
That's the way they described it. It was an interim measure. It was cheap. It was simple. It was fast. It gave them an emergency backstop if they absolutely had to trigger it. In that, I think everyone felt quite comfortable. And I think the other thing that's really good, I actually met with a solar installer who was recently hired by Ergon, and they said, what we recognise is we need some more grassroots people involved in our business to help us guide us to these practical issues. Where are you going to install this thing? What if there isn't an enclosure that'll fit it? And what about the cable? Is the cable rated, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And so they've started, actually, they've got a big hiring spree going on. If anyone's getting old and tired and they want to go work for Ergon, they're actually desperate for people who have got really sensible, practical knowledge. I commend them on that. They're working really, really hard on it. And
but wait a sec, you said it was a cheap solution. Maybe the device is cheap, but if you have to add all these bums on seats to actually administer it and to work out what's going on with it, it's not actually a cheap solution at all.
I agree, actually, and the devil's always in the detail, right? It is a cheap piece of hardware, but you've got to install it, you've got to support it, you've got to maintain it. These are all the questions that got brought up in the event. What do we do? Who tests that it's working? Are installers responsible for that? If there is some kind of failure with that device, who's responsible for going and sorting that out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So there's a whole lot of questions that, luckily, Energy Queensland, Ergon in particular, who are representing them, said these are all great questions that we need to go and address. We've moved as fast as we can. So I felt actually quite heartened by what they were saying about their willingness to listen to industry and the roadmap for putting more intelligent solutions in place. Everyone's kind of was talking about the fact that, they accept they have to do it. It's hard. It's a pain in the backside, but, they're getting on with it right now. As a backstop, as an emergency scenario, hopefully it won't ever be needed or won't be often needed, but it's there. It's something. And let's move as fast as we can to more intelligent solutions. So that was good to hear.
It can't be any harder than your what has to be a world record, the live wire ride from Brisbane to Townsville in a couple of days. That's incredible, Nigel.
That was my mate Ed. Well, we can go better than that, mate. He did Perth to Sydney. That was a hard ride.
No, I think I'm staring you. You probably caught the plane, yeah?
Oh, so you're talking about me.
And the other question is about the Townsville event. Like, to get a sold out event like that, the catchment area must be huge throughout North Queensland. Now, how's the industry going up there? I don't get much exposure to it. I'm just curious.
Look, the vibe was pretty good. Weather's been a real challenge. Of course, they've had a lot of rain. They haven't had the cyclones yet, but they've had an awful lot of rain. as is typical for this time of year. But, the vibe was pretty good. A lot of off-grid guys here. I met some guys here today who literally go from the NT border to, Townsville. That's their range. So there are a lot of people who are pretty dusty and had some pretty dusty trucks, but great people doing great stuff. And, the vibe was good.
Now, moving on, I've got a couple of points on the rumour mill. I can't say too much about companies and names and everything else, but some interesting news in the wholesale space. So one of the largest solar wholesalers has had a few of their key staff look to move elsewhere, according to the rumour mill. And the said company that they're going to seem to have pretty big aspirations to step into a similar space. So you're going to hear a few things around that, like we need more really tough competition in the wholesale space, like the margins haven't dropped enough. It's going to be very interesting to see. But it's this whole musical chairs that we're hearing about. And the other one, there's been a few whispers about other companies speaking to 1,5. Now, 1,5 are that German consortium that bought Natural Solar. They bought SolarAy. And I just wanted to float this with you. The whole idea of it is they're buying up market-leading companies in different countries, and they've got a whole solution. So it includes solar. I think they're even doing some OEM or doing some panels, but they've also got a hub that manages all hot water, air conditioner, all the stuff that we talk about, electrify everything. So they've bought 2 key companies, and the word is that there's going to be some more of them. Now, for someone who worked at Energy Matters back in the day, it's almost reminiscent of Sun Edison. Now, it might not be a popular opinion. Most people are very supportive and positive about what 1,5 are doing, and I hope they succeed. But the similar model is that they're raising lots of funds. They're picking off top companies and trying to build this behemoth to do something good. What are your thoughts, guys? Is that a fair comparison, or am I off the mark?
Yeah, look, Luke, I'll jump in there. That's it didn't take very long. The CEO of Energy Matters said to me, we're never going to have to worry about where people's paychecks are going to come for the next week because they're a multi-billion-dollar company. And I said, this is a slow-motion train wreck happening before my very eyes because they were buying assets that weren't making enough money to cover the interest if you were to borrow the money from the bank. And their theory was long-term profitability, not near-term profitability. But of course, ultimately, the shareholders want to get paid. They want dividends. And if you borrow the money from the bank wants their money back.
Well, I'm pretty sure that they're still private, but the difference is also they're integrating VPPs and playing in that space as well, which, I mean, only in WA a couple of weeks ago, we saw that Western Power enabled the VPP run by Pleco over here, and I think they've got 10.5 megawatt hours currently under their management. And Western Power called on them, and during the hours of 5 p.m. to 7 p.m., they dispatched power, supported the grid, and kept things stable. So it also integrates. Yeah,
that's an impressive number, 10 megawatt hours. I'm surprised that they've got that much out there. That's impressive.
So I suppose I'm drawing a comparison with Sun Edison in some of the similarities in the model. But on the flip side, if they get it right, they seem to be ticking a lot of boxes. It's just going to be interesting to see if they do acquire more companies. The challenge we saw with Sun Edison is that they acquired all these vastly different companies and tried to bring them in on a single culture, single management, whereas sometimes the secret source of these companies is in the people and the processes and the culture they've built.
Yeah, here, I'll jump in there because I've bounced this off a few people around the industry and asked their thoughts, and we've obviously been watching what's going on. And I'll say 2 things. Number one, I don't see anyone in the world yet who's managed to create the ecosystem for everything to work. The smart stuff, the batteries, the VPP. There's no one in the world really who really has that nailed, because we live in a vastly complicated world of idiosyncrasies and nuances. And so, I wish them the best of luck as well. But, what they've got at the moment is a great story, and, deploying that is a whole different matter. Secondly, I'm with you, mate, and having spoken to a bunch of people who've gone through acquisitions and looked at, consolidation in the industry and all those kinds of things. There was someone very wise who I won't name, who said to me, at the end of the day, if you merged every solar company in the country, and went to the PV manufacturers and said, right, look at our scale now. What benefit are you going to get? You're going to get a couple of cents, right? You're going to get a couple of cents. And then you go, well, now I've got to this scale, I can automate and I can systemize, and I can get my processes down pat and all that kind of stuff. Well, okay, yeah, you can, but now you got 5,000 companies or 1 or 3 companies or whatever the number is that have all got vastly different histories and vastly different cultures, and you've got a whole lot of money that's going to cost you to integrate as well. So the savings that you get are not necessarily going to provide you with a massive advantage. And as Karl rightly pointed out, you've got a whole lot of debt to pay off. So, I wish them the very best of luck. And we've all talked about the need for consolidation and aggregation and, some scale in this industry. But whether they can see that it can succeed at it or not remains to be seen.
Very, very tough to beat the man in the van, Nigel, because he's not saving single-digit cents a watt. He's saving significantly in overhead. So he's still a very competitive channel to market for anybody.
Yeah, well, we saw with Social Energy, who were one of the UK's largest solar installers, came to Australia 2.5 years ago, thereabouts. They were bringing Duracell batteries, and the talk was all around FCAS. It was around VPPs, installing batteries with every system. Now, what they did is they took what was really a very complex solution, like right top to bottom, from the sales process to the installer to the actual technology itself. And they deployed it not just in one capital or 2 capitals, it was all throughout regional areas. They grew very rapidly. There wasn't the framework of processes and everything else. What worked in the UK didn't work over here. And within a couple of years, they were insolvent. They left the industry. When they came, they grew rapidly, saying that we're this and we're that. Coming back to the Sun Edison thing, one of the big focuses was on the culture, but it was very much that American rah-rah culture, which isn't necessarily compatible in Australia. So 1,5, there's Chris Williams and Natural Solar and, local management there. But ultimately, if you can't get an interface between, a German culture company or a Chinese culture company or an American culture company with the Australian way of doing business, it's going to be bloody difficult.
I have to chime in on the cost reductions that you slated a couple of cents a watt. Ultimately, we're now at a semi-standardized format. We've got lots of manufacturers in the space with 54 cells in the traditional 415 watt frame size. Everyone has agreed on that, with the exception of Trina and Ryzen, that have got a slightly different frame size, but we're pretty close to everyone having a 54 cell module. And that space has been insanely competitive for 415s, 430s. Now, Jinko's got a multi-layer 440 in the same format. It's just hard to see how being able to go to a single supplier would be any of more advantage than having multiple suppliers compete for that business.
Not to mention the fact that Australia remains as the cheapest market in the world, right? So when push comes to shove, we've got lower margins, we've got lower retail prices than every other country in the world. And, compliance costs and servicing the market and servicing the country that we live in is not a cheap exercise. So, you put all of that together and it's not impossible, but it's a very challenging environment.
Now, moving along, Nigel, you sat in on the Smart Energy Council's Smart Transport Working Group. What was that all about?
I did. I was lucky enough to get an invite to join that along with a dozen or so other people for their first meeting today. It was pretty interesting, actually, because there isn't really a single body that exists in Australia yet to address the issues of, we've got to explain to people how EVs work. We've got to explain to people how EV charging works. We've got to educate the market. We've got to deal with all these technical and regulatory issues. EV installation was a big EV charger installation was a big topic on the agenda at SEA over the last couple of days of events, and everybody I spoke to is installing some degree of EV chargers for customers already. And everyone can see it as the next boom, like solar was 10, 20 years ago, because it's about to explode. We can all see that. So it was really interesting. The Smart Energy Council are pretty good at positioning themselves to fill those gaps where they see opportunities where other people aren't doing that. And it was actually a really diverse group. First meeting, so early days, but I think it's actually quite a good conversation to be having, and quite an interesting working group to be in, because they're trying to not only, and in fact, the thing that impressed me the most, or maybe they were just trying to stroke my ego, but they said we're really interested in two-wheeled mobility as well. We see that as an entryway to, and certainly you look around the world, and two-wheel electric vehicle mobility, that ground up approach as it was described today. There's a plan. John was talking about going to visit a factory where they have a plan for 10 million two-wheeled electric vehicles capacity in this factory, right?
Wow.
Massive.
Are we talking scooters, motorbike format?
Scooters and tuk-tuks, right? Yep. So huge issues. And the volume of two-wheelers already globally is enormous. It's a great entry level. You don't have to go buy a $50,000 Harley Livewire or an Energica. You can start off with, already in Australia, an electric scooter, or a little entry level bike for a few $1,000. In fact, even Ergon, they mentioned they just put a new report up on their website about the EV volumes that just went up online yesterday. They highlighted, I think it was like 3,500 or 4,000 pure electric cars in Queensland now. Might have even been just in Ergon's area. 1,700 two-wheelers, mate. So, we're right on their tail with the two-wheelers, because it's an entry-level option. So
we're talking road registered or equivalent. We're not talking what
road registered,
not the electric scooters you buy at JB Hi-Fi or Alibaba's. No. We're talking road registered, capable of actually pulling some grunt on the road.
That's right. Little commuter vehicles for people to get back and forth to the office or back and forth to wherever. So, more power to the SEC and everyone else who was involved in getting that working group up and running, and trying to bring all those elements together. There was a lot of talk about actually dealing with the DNSPs. There was a couple of companies there talking about the fact they've got more money from the government than they can manage at the moment. They can build charging stations, and but they can't get them processed by the DNFPs. They can't get approvals to connect. In fact, there was one example where they said, we installed a station, got it up and running in November last year. We're still waiting to connect it. And so, for a lot of these infrastructure issues that everyone's concerned about, they're actually blocked by the DNSPs because they're too slow to move, or too slow to keep up with the rapid transition. So it sounds like solar 10 years ago all over again to me.
Yeah, look, Nigel, I've had first-hand experience with this just last week. We talked about it briefly last week, with chargers being installed with undersized cables and undersized breakers and so on and so forth. And a big shout out to Jed from Jedlec. Went and visited him today. He's installing all the EV chargers that he puts in with 16 mil squared, whether it's single or three-phase, and he's running a comms cable to everything. And I said, wow, that's even more than what I thought you needed. I thought you needed 10. And he says, at the end of the day, when we get vehicle to grid or grid to vehicle, some of these chargers that we're likely to see, operating on the DC side, and there's a good chance we'll have 30 kilowatt inverters. So why not cable for it? Which I was really impressed with.
And just on a lesser scale, there was that story of the guy in New Zealand after the floods, and he was without power for days on end, and he was operating power from his BYD Atto 3. So I don't think that was actually going into the house even. He's just plugging in the kettle, the lights, a power board when he needs it, but better than nothing.
Yeah. And obviously yet another natural disaster. They just seem to be adding up one after the other. Maybe it's we watch more on the news. And today on the news, Putin tells us that if he doesn't finish the war this year, he's going to drop a nuke.
I don't know where to go from there, man. There's so much commentary at the moment, I think.
That one definitely, that's a spit of coffee out moment for sure.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of it, man. Yeah.
What do you make of it, Nigel?
Well, I didn't see that one, Karl, but I did see China come out today and say the war's got to win. And it was pretty interesting to hear China come out and say, we're willing to broker this. We've got a 12-point ceasefire plan. They were calling for a ceasefire. They were saying the world does not need a nuclear war, does not want a nuclear war, and they were against it. No doubt, they're supplying plenty of weapons to both Ukraine and Russia, from what I hear. But I felt a bit more positive after hearing China finally take a position on it. Whether it's their real position or not, who knows? But
Well,
Yeah.
you say that, and they are the largest oil and gas customer currently of Russia. And also, we saw during the week that Joe Biden went to Kiev and then he went to Warsaw and he met up with everyone and sort of bolstered them. And it's the 1 year anniversary, so it's significant. Putin gets out there and gives a big speech to the mass crowd, which apparently people were offered so many rubles, the equivalent of $10, $11 to attend and to cheer. But the other thing was that the Chinese foreign minister on that day met with Putin. We've seen these pictures where Putin sits right down the end of the desk and he's worried about his security and safety. The Chinese foreign minister sat in the middle of the table directly opposite Putin, touching distance. So there was a lot of symbology there. So I appreciate China saying that. And I hope it's true. For all of us, as much as the solar industry and new energy industry has benefited somewhat from the energy crises around the world, it's really not doing us much good because it's pushing up inflation. There's all this geopolitical instability. And it'd just be nice to not have the threat of nuclear war and people dying and, Europe being pulled into wars at the moment. I'd love to just get on with doing the stuff we need to do to keep the climate under control. So we're not going to see this stuff continue to escalate.
Oh, look, at the end of the day, this is, as far as I can tell, this is an energy war. That there might be this ideological thing that Ukraine should be part of the USSR scenario, but ultimately there's a shitload of gas that went through the Ukraine and they were sending them a bill. I think it's going to hurt Russia long term in that obviously everybody in Europe has pulled out all the stops and we're seeing enormous quantities of batteries and solar panels being installed in Europe. I read the other day the total manufacturing capacity of solar modules is now well north of 600 gigawatts, and that last year the Chinese put on another 200 gigawatts worth of capacity. And when we talked about this more than a year ago, back 10 years ago, we had the lecture from the boss man of Sun Edison, and he said to us, "Do you know what a gigawatt is?"
Well, we do now, and just seeing the expansion. That just to roll on from that, though, we've seen due to the energy crisis and the cost of materials and everything else, there's a heap of inflation going on at the moment, and the Reserve Bank thinks the solution is to belt mortgagees over the head and to put the rates up, even though banks are running bumper profits, corporates are running bumper profits. Is this inflation and the rapid increase in energy costs good for the solar industry or not?
It's definitely not good for the solar industry, and general consensus on the Vine is where people have had $500,000 or $1 million worth of work in their pipelines there, that pipeline isn't there at the moment. And certainly in terms of battery sales for all manufacturers, they're well down. As far as I know, there's a lot of wholesalers that have got lots of batteries in stock at the moment. So that top end of town where people were spending money on expensive batteries has really slowed down a lot. So we've crushed disposable income to the tune of, say, $300,000 is worth $12,000 extra a year, from a interest rate with a 1 in front of it to an interest rate with a 5 in front of it. And that's definitely hurting I'll call it the luxury end of the solar market. And we haven't seen a particular upswing in demand, even though we know that solar saves people money. So cross fingers.
Really? Fucking hell. Carl, I don't know if I agree with that. This is I'm only on the second show and I'm disagreeing with you twice already. I don't buy that. I mean, there's definitely nervousness out there from people about interest rates, right? And some people are really, really hurting on it. But Tesla announced that they're dropping their price by $1,600 today on their Powerwalls.
They needed to, Nigel, because no one was buying them.
Yeah,
it's pretty significant, man. Like that. That's a significant
straight up that simple.
I don't know.
Significant price drop.
Yeah, it's a big price. I mean, they're still not back down as low as they were when they kicked off, that's for sure. But it's a bloody big price drop. And they've also assured the channels that, supply is now not unrestricted, but freed up dramatically. So they basically said, we're going to drop the price and we're going to make them a lot more available and we're going to solve all those issues and it's ready to go. Let's go. And, you can't underestimate, and everybody was talking about, this kind of double-edged sword of, nervousness about what the Reserve Bank's saying. And I'm going to stay away from the politics and everything else of it. But, there's no doubt that interest rate rises, these continued interest rate rises make people nervous. But on the flip side, you've got energy prices still going up and that makes people nervous too. And, solar's the only way to really quickly and simply solve that. And, batteries fit into that equation. So, I think the Tesla announcement is a really interesting symbolic movement in the market. I mentioned it. I was sitting there with the big battery supplier today, and I went, "Hey, have a look at this. Tesla has dropped their price." His face went white, and you'd see him texting the boss straight away, going, "We've got to adjust our prices. Look what Tesla have done, right?" So that's going to create some competition in the market. The guys I was talking to up here, there was one guy in particular does a great job servicing those premium clients. He's not having any trouble at all selling multiple batteries into big clients who've got 2 or 3 EVs and all that kind of stuff. I think it'll be tougher in the bottom end of the market, but the bottom end of the market's always tough. I think I'm still very, very bullish about this deal.
Yeah, New South Wales government has announced some sort of, I think, $100 million fund for electrification or something similar. Yep. I haven't looked into the details, but I think that's tip of the iceberg. We're going to see more and more of this because the government need to meet their targets and there's all these commitments. The only way we're going to do so and electrify everything and decarbonise the economy is if, it's going to be hand in hand with government and policy and doing this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the end of the day, we'll continue to drive stimulus in the market. WA just got a handout to install EV chargers. Do you know what the exact number was? $500, $1,000 for businesses to roll out EV chargers. So effectively, there's a decent handout there. We've also just got Solar Victoria's hot water or heat pump online applications up and running last week. As a reference point, there's more than 230,000 solar PV rebates have been approved and less than 3,000 heat pump / hot water rebates approved. So there's a massive opportunity of a couple of 100,000 people who have got the solar rebate, who are eligible for the heat pump rebate, that can go out and get a heat pump.
And I mean, we've discussed that on previous episodes, isn't it? If you're a solar company who's been bread and butter solar and maybe add in some batteries, well, it's time to look at the burger with the lot. It's time to look at what their hot water's doing. What's their, heating and cooling? What are they cooking with? Can we take them on the journey of electrifying everything? And if we can, number one, that's more revenue for the company that's doing it. Number two, it's a better outcome for the customer because they're going to save money in the long term. Number three, we're saving the bloody planet. We're decarbonising it. We're helping meet those really lofty targets that we actually have to meet.
Yeah, and amazingly, I mathed this out the other day. By the time I'm not paying for electricity, I'm not paying for gas, and I'm not buying petrol, EV's done nearly 20,000 Ks in 6 months. So I'm on track for 40,000 Ks this year in the EV. If I was buying petrol, that's $8,000 worth of petrol that I didn't have to buy. And electricity and gas is another $4,000 that I didn't have to buy. So I'm literally $12,000 better off for a 25 kilowatt system on the roof.
So as long as no nukes get dropped, you're going to have a really good future.
Electrify everything. This is the answer. It's absolutely spectacular. The electric future that doesn't involve Russian gas and oil is a winner.
And another plug, Saul Griffith's book, The Big Switch. If you want to understand the whole picture and see him flesh it out, it's very digestible for anyone. I've been sharing it around to people, not just in the solar industry, to get them across what's going on.
Available as an audio book too. I was listening to it on a long trip recently, so you can get it for free on Spotify, I think.
Oh, you can? Cool.
Yeah. Can you listen to it as a whole audio book if you're interested as well? I think Sol is also coming, if I'm not mistaken. I saw some announcement today about he's all over the place at the moment, but he's at all sorts of places spruiking what he's doing. I think he might be going to Fully Charged. I'm on a panel at Fully Charged, which is coming up in a few weeks in Sydney. It's one of the biggest electric vehicle shows in the world. they pull hundreds of thousands of punters into these shows, and there's one coming up in Sydney in March, and they bring together the whole story about the consumer interest in EVs, the tech nerds, and also energy and renewables all into one big show at Sydney Olympic Park. I wouldn't be surprised if we get 50 or 100,000 people through that show. So,
wow,
yeah, it's going to be, consumers want to know about this stuff. They're all interested in EVs, as we talked about last episode. Where, I think you undercooked it, Karl. I reckon we could go over 100,000 vehicles this year. We were 20 or 30,000 this year. As long as the supply comes through, I reckon we're going to see a huge uptake in electric vehicles as soon as they're available.
Come on.
You think that there's hundreds of thousands of people will turn up to see this guy present. As it happens, we'll give another shout out to Sophie. She arranged a Queenscliff community group buy. They were shortlisted to provide solar and heat pumps and other energy efficiency stuff to the community. And it happened last Thursday. It happened to be 37 degrees in Queenscliff, and they expected a turnout between 50 and 75 people, and over 200 people turned up. So there's definitely lots and lots of interest in the community, which is great.
Fantastic. And Nigel's going to have his diary there. So any two-wheel EV manufacturers or people with a vehicle there, you just need to jump into his diary when you're going to lend him the vehicle so he can road test it, do the write-ups. Sound about right, Nige?
Yeah, spot on, mate. I'm available for testing now.
Exactly.
Luke, I'm available for testing any four-wheeled EVs.
Just got to drag him out of his Model 3 performance and he'll give it a go.
Benchmark, mate. Benchmark. Yeah.
All right, guys, that's all we've got time for this episode. Thanks, heaps. I think next episode we're going to drop in the one with Sophie Wright, which was a really good episode. So we'll get back together in a few weeks. I hope it's a good time for you guys. Any parting words?
No, thanks for having me on the show again, Luke. You do a great job of gathering us all together. And we've obviously had Nigel, who's now a staple or a member of the panel. Of course, the panel will probably grow into half a dozen people over time, and then we'll get our shot on Channel 9.
Well, Waleed Ali might be available shortly anyway, by the sounds of it. So, yeah. All right, Nige, mate. Safe travels back from Townsville, and have
Thanks,
a great
fellas.
weekend. All right. Thanks
guys.
for listening. Share it round. Please click subscribe, do a review, interact with it somehow, so the algorithms can push us up somehow and get more listeners. Have a good one. Thank you.